All right, I want to show you how to work with gradients in Illustrator. Um, I'm going to show you the linear gradient first. So I have this little illustration here, just of a simple sort of um, landscape, and it's very sort of elementary, which is perfect for just sort of this demonstration. So the first thing I'm going to do here is with just the selection tool, I'm just going to select the sky here like this, and I can see that the whole sky is selected. Um, and there are two things that you should know about, or two areas in which you can work with gradients. One is there is a gradient tool here. So when you activate the gradient tool here, it will, when you start to sort of click in here, you can start making modifications. But to actually make edits, you're going to want over here in this panel over here, I'm going to click on gradient here. And this might be your default when you come to your gradient panel. And so you're not really seeing much of anything here on this slider. So you want to go up to this little hamburger button here. It has three lines. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to show options. So when my options come up, I'm going to just kind of start with this first sort of gradient. And let me just kind of talk to you a little bit about what's in this gradient panel. One is if I just hit on this down arrow here, you can see that there are some presets that are already in here. So here's just a color to black, here's color to white, here's color to 0 opacity, and then color to complement. So you can select one of those. Depending on what you're working with, whether it is the fill or the stroke, this is where you can select if you want to apply the gradient to the stroke or to the fill. And then let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and select this first one. So I'm going to select that one. So you can see immediately when I did that, it turned it by default. Just went with this first one right here. And it gives me some options here. So the first thing is that it did the fill with black. So you see it went from blue to black here. The next button underneath is that I can always switch my gradient. So if I can just click on this, it just flips it to the opposite side. Okay, so I can do that. I can also change the direction. So say that I want it at 30 degrees or I want it at 150. This is one way to do this. You can also look at the method. Right now I have it under classic, and we'll just leave that for now. And then I want to show you this sort of gradient slider. This slider here is where we see the color from blue to black. So what we can do is we can change the colors in here. So for example, say that I don't want this light blue here. I want it to be maybe a dark blue. So I'm going to double click here. And then I can come in, I can obviously kind of come in and find, create. I can also sort of select on here if I have a different sort of blue that I have in mind. Okay, so if I'm looking for something that's more like that, I could do something like that. And then I just click off. All right, I am going to change this, the gradient slider over here from black. I'm going to double click that too, and let's just change this one because it's way too dark. So let's do something that's maybe like that, and then I want it to be much lighter. So we'll go something, actually something maybe around there. All right, you can see that when this panel comes up, I have different options here. We're going to change the opacity. I can also go to my swatches panel. So if I want to go to a swatch and just select a swatch, I can do that here. I can also come here, whoops, where I can then sort of select something if I want it to actually match something else. So that can be an option for you. Okay. All right. So we have these two here, and then there's this little diamond here. And this diamond here allows us to change how much of sort of the gradient shift here. So if I slide it over to the left, you can see that I have mostly this dark blue, and then it goes to light blue. And then obviously I can move it over this way as well. All right, so I'm just going to put back that in the center. And then I can go in here and adjust the progression here. I really don't want it to look like this. And while you can certainly use one of these, I prefer just to click in the art space here, and I click and drag. So wherever you click is going to be the start, like this. Do you see that? So the start was the dark blue. Okay. It can stay within the actual area here. It can be where I can readjust it if I want to, do something like this. It just really depends on how you want it to function, is how you might actually go about doing this. All right. So I'll do something like this. I don't want this dark blue anymore, so I'm actually going to double click this, and we can either select a swatch here. So maybe I'll go something like this. Let's see. And then maybe I'll come in here and tweak this a bit just so that I have something a little more unique. So maybe something like that. And then make that a little lighter. Okay. I'm going to then slide this over here. And now what I can do is I can actually add another color here. So do you see how when I click or hover over this bar, I can see that I have an arrow. So if I just click here, I can add another color. So I can add a color like this where I can come in and say, okay, I'm going to make this one ever so slightly darker, something like that, so that it looks a little bit more natural, more realistic. And then I can just kind of slide this around, and then I can slide this around. So, and then if I want to continue adding, I can certainly add in a ton, right? So say that I really want to kind of do something like this. Then I can just sort of move these around based on what I want. Now, say that you have colors that you don't want, or you have too many that you don't think that you need. So for example, I don't want this really dark blue. I just did this in here so I can show you. You can always just click, hold, and then drag off, and it gets rid of that color in here that's been added here. Okay, so I'm going to actually move this the middle one here to the very sort of top. Really want it to look a lot like it's a sunny day. And generally we see, even in a sunny day, that the top of the sky is often much darker, right? So as it's much darker, and then it slowly sort of fades to a lighter um, value here. So I'm going to do something like that. I think that looks okay for what I'm doing here. And then you can certainly kind of come in when you are working in, when you click on one of these swatches down here, you can change the opacity, which we're going to look at, but not necessarily in this particular one here. All right. And then I can just pull off there. All right, so, and then I can just kind of adjust. This is what this line in here, it functions exactly like this right here. So it mimics this right here. This tool right here is actually called a gradient annotator. Most people don't know the particular terms of these. They just know that what this does and how to actually make it work for them. You can also see that when I click on it, I can actually move it around, right? So I can move my gradient around. I can just kind of click and move it around. I can move any of these around. I can extend these down like this. You can see as I hover over, it goes into the rotate, so I can kind of rotate like this as well. So I can do a whole bunch of things just in this sort of annotator, which is, I think, a lot easier for a lot of people um, uh, to work with it because it's much more intuitive than trying to necessarily always know the individual components in here. So I generally use both of them at the same time. So I will use some of this where I'm moving things around, and then I'll jump over here and make some adjustments here. So I work with both of those together. And in general, we should have a nice sort of gradient here. If you're not happy with your gradient, so you see when I selected this, I actually have to come back over to the tool. So you see how when I click the tool, this annotator came back up, which means I can come in and make adjustments here. I'm going to bring that dark blue way up to the top here like that, and then just sort of bring this so that it's a nice sort of smoother transition there. So something a little bit like that. And then just click off of it. All right, and now we have a linear gradient in our sky. All right, as we're continuing to work with gradients, let's talk about a radial gradient. So we're going to look at the radial gradient on this little ball. So I'm going to call it a ball right now. It's just a circle. I'm going to click on it to activate it so that the gradient can happen in this particular shape here. So I have this selected here. I'm going to go to my gradient panel here. And the next gradient option for us is radial. And so I'm going to click on radial like this. And obviously I don't want it to look like this. I really want it to look like the sun is casting some sort of light onto this ball here. So I'm going to come in here and see if there's a different option. There is. I'm going to go from color to white like this. And then because I don't really want white on the outside, I'm just going to reverse this real quick like this. There we go. Now that's looking a lot more like what I was intending. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my gradient tool here. And when I click on that, do you see how I have this gradient annotator that comes up, and it functions a lot like some of the other tools where we have a bunch of different options here. So you can expand, and for this actually I'm going to suggest that you expand beyond the size of the shape. So by default it goes to the shape size, but I'm actually going to move that so it's much larger. I can also do that here by clicking on this square as well. And then this annotator, I can move this obviously right here. And in this case here, when I click on this, see, right now when I click on this, it's directly in the center. But I can actually sort of extend this to make it so that it's offset. And I'm actually going to do that here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to also rotate it because our sun is up in the top left. So I'm going to kind of line that up like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this. So I'm going to kind of bring in some of the red here. Now, the white is pretty light for this to look realistic. So I'm going to bring this in here. And instead of kind of clicking on here, if I just kind of click into an area, so if I click somewhere around here, what it's going to do is it's going to create, there we go. It's going to create a swatch that is kind of the color that is that transition right here. And I do want it to be pink instead of white. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the white, and let's see if I can kind of get that to go. Yeah, there we go. And so I just dragged it off of the annotator. And then I can bring this all the way up to the top. And then that helps me to have a smoother sort of transition there, like this. But I don't think that this necessarily looks very realistic as being three-dimensional just yet. So I am going to continue to tweak this. So as I'm looking at this, I can also change this. So if I actually want it to not look like a circle, but I need it to be an ellipse, I can certainly do that. I can also continue to sort of rotate it. So you get lots of things here that I think are pretty easy to manipulate. And it's much more intuitive, like I said before, to make these sorts of adjustments. Okay, so I'm gonna do something like that. And I think actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a couple of things. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to click. It should be able to click here. If I can't, I'm gonna come up here. I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna double click here because I wanna make this one a much darker red here so that I'm starting to get a dark, rich red. And then what I'm going to do is kind of just sort of adjust this a little bit so that I can see what this might look like. And then maybe adjust how much of this is happening here, something along the lines of this. And if this is also ultimately too light, I can always sort of double click on that. We can make it slightly darker if we want. I can also just, I'm going to pull it off like that. And if I bring this up here, right, or sort of adjust it, let me do another one here where maybe, because it's going to pick up, if you remember, it's going to pick up whatever that transition is here. And now if I double click here, I might be able to get kind of what I'm looking for here, which is not a white. It's more of a red. And then I'm just going to go ever so slightly with a little bit of white, something like that. And then I'll click off of that. And then if I do this, now we're starting to make it look a little more like it's dimensional here. And then, we can continue sort of tweaking this as we work. You can always remember, I can't make any adjustments in here unless I click on the tool in the toolbox here. And again, I can sort of adjust this. And this is important to know because do you see how much it's kind of coming in the frame here? This is also important to know when you're looking at how big this is too, right? So if I come in here and I just extend it, it's going to make that transition smoother. And if you've taken my 2D design class, you know that the transitions are super important in order to make it look more like the smooth transitions really help to create that illusion that it's dimensional. So I might suggest that you sort of consider expanding it further out so that you can get that smooth transition. All right. I think our little ball here is working well. Before we sort of move on here, I do want to show you, I've given you two ellipses underneath it that's supposed to be the cast shadow. So let's take a look at that. We can use the same sort of thing here. I'm going to click on the black one, okay? And now I'm going to add a gradient here. And I can do the gradient like this, which goes from uh, color to white. So I had it at black, so it could be something like that. Or I can use color to 0 opacity, and that's the one I'm actually going to select here. All right, so you see what it did here is that it has the black right in the center here, and as it comes out, it's going to disappear. And we can see that in here. Whoops, we can see that in here if we click on the swatch here and then click on the swatch here. Do you see how this one, even though it has black, it is actually at 0% opacity? And then if I click on this one, it's at 100% opacity. And it's important to know that. And I think it's important in order to make sort of a smooth transition is to think about what actually swatch you have here, because even if it's at 0%, sometimes it won't work as well unless you have it the same um, color as what you want it to blend with. So for example, I'm going to click on this. So do you see what I just did there? So that it kind of blends into that. So I used that little feature here as I was doing this. Whoops, I don't know why I just did that. Okay, now I'm going to tweak this a bit. I'm going to do this and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to squish it, right, so that it's kind of living and functioning like I want it to. So cast shadows have a much darker right underneath the actual object itself. So I'm just going to sort of adjust this a little bit. I can also move this a little bit so that it's a little bit forward like that. And then I'm probably going to bring this back a little bit, something along the lines of that. So there's a smoother transition. So I'm going to do something maybe like that. And then, so I'm going to click off of that, see what that looks like. And so I have that, but I don't have a totally smooth transition here just yet. So let's go into this one right here. We're going to do the same thing here where I'm going to come in, I'm going to select, I want to make sure that I have the color to then 0. So I'm going to do that. Do you see how that now disappears into the green? And then I'm going to click in to here where I have this at 100%. And then this is the gray, but I actually just need it to be sort of that green. Remember I just said that a moment ago. I'm going to click on this, come into the green here, click on that. Sometimes it makes a difference, so I would definitely suggest considering that as you're working on this. Come back over here, and then I can sort of make an adjustment like this. And again, you can sort of expand this out as need be, depending on how much transition, how much fading away you might want to do here. All right, let's click off of that and see how this looks. And you can see that we're starting to get a bit more of a blend here. So now I'm going to sort of adjust this a bit more like this so that it sort of blends more into this gray. And here what I probably would do here is I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to bring this much tighter in so that it doesn't have this sharp edge right here as it's working. So I'm going to do that like that so that I can get it super dark underneath. So you see how I'm starting to get a blend here? So if I come back in here, let's just sort of continue sort of adjusting this a bit. So I make it a bit darker right underneath, get that a little closer. So maybe something more like this. And then now you can see that well, we still have some more rings here, so we certainly can still kind of play around, work with that a bit more. But you can see what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to get sort of that nice smooth fade. And that fade can happen here. Let's see if we just make it even smaller. It's definitely disappeared here on the left. It hasn't disappeared here on the right. So I'll continue tweaking on this, see if you can get that to work. You can see that the whole point of what I'm trying to show you here is to have it sort of fade away so that we can have more of that sort of transition. And it may be that now that this is much lighter, I might need to come in here and you see how it is actually at 100%. Let's change that to 0. There we go. Now I can see how this looks here. All right, and then let me come over here to get this tool, and I'm just going to slide this over some. There we go. See in just a moment when I click off. Um, Now we have a nice fade. See how that fade has disappeared? So you can kind of play with this, see if you can get that to work. Again, just make sure that you have the transition. You can change this up as well as you're sort of working on this to get that fade. All right. Go ahead and continue working on that. And then my challenge to you before I continue on and showing you other sorts of gradients is that in this file, I want you to go through and I want you to colorize this sun here. Now the sun is a compound shape, so I want you to see if you can colorize it so that it looks like a sun. And when we come back to the same file, you'll see that I have my sun already colorized. Let's talk about freeform gradients. So we're going to do this in the clouds and then also the green of the grass. Okay, so let's first look at this cloud here that is white, and it's the largest one that's in here. So I'm going to select it, so make sure you're doing the selection tool here, and then I'm going to come over to my gradient panel here. And this option here is actually the third option here. So I'm going to do freeform gradient, excuse me. I'm going to click on that. And by default, or generally what comes up is points here. And you can see that what it did is it just picked up some colors. I was playing around a little bit in the green area, so maybe it picked up that. But all you have to do here is as you sort of move these around, you can double click on them like this, and we can come in and go back to looking at different options here. So I'm going to do white, and maybe I will add just a tiny bit of blue like that. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to double click on that, and maybe I'll just add a little darkness here. I'll just make sure it's a little light there. And these come up just sort of by default, and you can click on them and just sort of move them around, and then you can add them. So you can see that as I'm hovering over, see the little plus symbol here. I'm going to double click here, go here to make sure that that stays white. Okay, something like that. One of the things that you can see as we're working on this is that there's this ring here, and this is the area of influence. So we can actually adjust this by clicking on this and sort of moving it around. Okay, we can also change the opacity here, and you can see that it's set at the spread of 0 right now. So I'm going to just come in here and sort of move these things around like this so I can kind of see what I can sort of make happen here. I'm going to double click on this. Let me go to blue here, and I'm going to come up here and maybe make this one just a little lighter, something along the lines of that. And then let's go ahead and just see what changing the opacity might do. And you can see that when we change the opacity, I'm starting to see the line behind it. So you can see how it's taking effect here. So I can certainly sort of play around with that. I am going to maybe do it 90%. Double click on this. Let's go to 90% here. All right, I'm going to add another point here, and I'm going to double click, and I want this one to be white so that there's white at the top here. Okay, and then I sort of can move things around if I want it to look a little differently. You can see that as I'm doing this, you see how it's kind of changing some of where the gradients are here. Okay, and then I can certainly sort of increase the influence of this, adjust it like this. So you can see that we have an opportunity to do that. All right, so I can just press escape, and that will take me out of this here, and now I have sort of a gradient. Let's just go ahead quickly and do our other two here. So this is the one that's in the front. It has the greatest contrast. The one in these kind of progressively going sort of back will be as they kind of recede back in space here. So click on it so that it's selected. I'm going to go to freeform gradient here. And I can always get rid of these by sort of pulling them off. Do you see how I just did that? I just sort of pulled it off, and then I'm just going to kind of move things around. So I'm going to double click on this, I'm going to add white there. I'm going to double click on this and maybe go to something like that. So I'll come in here and make that a bit duller. And then let's change the opacity to maybe 30, maybe 20%, something like that. And you can see that I don't have much influence here. So you can see that as I'm doing that, you see how it's changing the spread here. So I can certainly come in and put a different sort of spread. And you can see as soon as I take it out of the object like this, it will get rid of it. So I need to be really sort of careful about where I place this as it's sort of getting smaller. And then maybe I just make this one a little higher here. I'm going to increase the influence a little bit like that. So I only have two. And then maybe on this one, I'll just double click that and let's see, I'm going to give it a little bit of blue. So I'm going to go to this blue here first, and then I'm going to come all the way, something like this, and then I think I'll probably leave that at 100%. All right, so I'll click off of that so we can kind of see what we're looking at here. And then I'll do the same with this. I'm going to click on it, select it, go to the freeform here, and then with points, it's automatically kind of giving me some points. If it's hard to kind of look, don't forget you can always kind of zoom in. I'm going to do that. I'll leave this at blue right here. I probably will make this one white. Or actually, I'll go with blue and then come back here and just make it a really, really light blue. Something like that. And then I can sort of do that. I'm going to actually put another one here so that I have a bunch of white here. I'm going to add another one here. So I'll double click there. Um, let's see, what do I have here? It's 100% here. So probably do the same here, but let's make this one maybe a little darker so it kind of looks like it's getting darker along the edge here. All right, so I'm going to zoom back out and you can see what I've created here. You can always go in. Remember, if you select it, if you go to your gradient tool here, it will give you access to these points again, and then I can come in, I'm going to double click this and maybe make the saturation a bit duller here too, just so that it doesn't sort of stand out, that center point there. Okay, so those are points, and you can see that you can do all kinds of fun things with them. They can make things look really dimensional, and you have a lot of choices here. Now let's go ahead and look at the green of the grass here. I'm just going to go into, and I'm just going to select this very bottom one, which is the one that's closest to us. And this time I'm going to go back up to the freeform here, but instead of actually using any of these here, so I'm going to pull that out, I'm actually going to select, instead of points, I'm going to go to lines. Okay, so if I go to lines here, it will allow me to click. It will look like I'm adding a point, but you see how it's kind of creating a line, and you can see that next to the cursor there's not only just a little circle, but there is also sort of a squiggly line, and that's important because it's going to function a lot like the curvature pen tool, where I'm able to kind of curve it along this sort of direction. Do you see what I'm able to do here? So if I want to sort of kind of work within sort of the dimensions here. And then what I can do is, once I've done that, just press escape so that you finish that. I'm going to double click this and then start to kind of give it a color. Sorry, I want to try to grab a green there. I'll double click this, grab another sort of green. And I'm just sort of quickly kind of giving some greens here. I'll tweak that in just a moment. But I want to explain a little bit about why you might want to use this. So right now, this one is still functioning as a point. So I need to, if I go to my points here, I should be able to select that. There we go. So I have to go back to points, and I'm just going to pull that off like that. And then I'm going to come back to lines here. And now I'm going to do another sort of line like this. And again, this can be helpful if you are kind of working along the lines of this. You can always stop. So I'm going to press escape just to stop this. You can always press the option key as you're clicking, and you can see that it kind of gets rid of the curve unless you want to have it curved again, okay? So you can see as you kind of move that. So you can sort of play around with this a bit, and then I'm going to double click this, and let's, instead of selecting one of those, let's just go in and sort of give it some, oops, double click. I'm just going to give it some darkness here. And you can see how this could give some gradient along a, whoops, line that you create, so that it doesn't really have sort of a cone of influence here, but it allows us to sort of then kind of come in. I can, oops, meant to just do this and sort of adjust it. And depending on what sort of, where the light's coming, so if I want to get rid of this, I'm going to click on this one and I'll just press delete, and you can see that I can delete that. I can actually click this and then reselect and add, just like you would with the curvature pen tool. But this will allow us to, I'm just going to undo that because I actually want to also, I'm going to click on this one, I'm going to delete this one. And what I'm going to do is, so I'm just trying to make it kind of look a little bit like the sun is hitting right here, sort of in this direction. I'll go ahead and change this one as well, but maybe not as dark as the bottom here. And then I'll kind of click off here, okay? And then just make sure you hit escape, and that will allow you to stop that. And then now you can see that you have sort of endless possibilities as far as sort of how you map out and where you place some gradients. So give it a try. It's the freeform gradient option here in the gradient panel. Okay, so we've done the linear gradient, we've done a radial gradient, we've also done the freeform gradient, and we've all done that, or we've done that with all of the fills. We can also do gradients with the stroke. So I have this line right here, and you can see that if I have my line right here activated here, it will make the change to the actual stroke. So that's important to know, that when we come over to our gradient panel, we want to make sure that when we apply the gradient, we need to make sure that the stroke is in front or is, activated. You can obviously click on that, but you can see that there's actually also a short key command, which is if you just press the letter X, it will switch between the fill or the stroke. So we'll make sure the stroke is selected. And now we're just going to go in and just put a linear gradient here like this. And because we're working within the stroke itself, we have some additional options here. So this first one right here is, it applies the gradient within the stroke. So you can see that it goes from blue to black, which is what was here. We can do this one, which it applies it along it. So it essentially kind of looks very much like the same. And then we have this last one, which is applying gradient across the stroke like this. So we're gonna do something hopefully a little fun here. So we can change any of the colors we want. Just, it functions exactly like how it was before. So if we want to select something different, it will give us this. Because I've kind of set this up to look like a rainbow, I want to give it a rainbow effect here. So I've created a gradient for you already. So if you just come in here and, whoops, let's see, is it frozen on me? Oh, no, okay. I actually, if you go into the three lines here, it's the hamburger, and I'm going to go into show presets. And in the presets, you'll see that I have this one that I've already created for you, which I'll just select this one like this, and it will apply it, okay? Right now it's applying it under this apply along the stroke itself. But if we select, so you can see I just have the red, yellow, green, blue, and violet or purple. You can see I didn't include the orange here because the orange is being made here, so I don't feel like I need to actually have another swatch. Whereas I could not do that between the yellow and the blue. The green did not show up, so I needed to put the green. So with this being here, if I click on this one here, apply gradient across the stroke, you can see that it actually makes it look like a rainbow. Now, this is a really sort of another feature. So I showed you this kind of, we can get the same sort of effect when I showed you when we're working through brushes. So this could be a neat way to apply this and to kind of do some cool things. But before we actually go on with this, because I want to show you one additional thing. So let's just go into our pen tool. And just for the sake of this, we're just going to go ahead and make a kind of curved line. So we're going to just do something that's pretty simple here, where we're just going to do a simple sort of line like that. And then I'm just going to press return, and I'll go to my, I'll press Shift C, and this will allow me to get to my anchor point um, tool here so that I can sort of modify this. I actually don't want to modify the ends here. I actually was doing it because I wanted to come here. And let me pull back out so I can see a bit better. And then I'm just going to rotate this. You can see that if I click on it, it just sort of switches it back. I just want sort of a nice sort of smooth point here. I'm clicking the A tool right now just to sort of spread this out a little bit so that it's maybe a little bit more even. So it doesn't really matter how smooth it is for what I'm going to show you here. All right, so you can see that it picked the stroke, picked the same attribute that I last used, which was the rainbow here. So if I come back to the gradient tool here, you can see that I have this right now, and by default, it's just along the path here. So if I go ahead and I select, and actually let's take off of the rainbow just so that we can kind of see this. Let's just go to the white and black here. So make sure it's selected. I can see I just selected off of it. And I'll just click this so you can see here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Apply Gradient across the stroke. So instead of going from left to right, it's going to go kind of wrap around from top to bottom. So like this. So you see the black is down here, and then we have white. One of the things that's super useful, especially if you want to make something look dimensional, so just for the sake of this, I have this line like this. Let's go ahead, and this is a kind of a hidden feature in Illustrator that is not generally part of sort of most sort of learning, but it is super useful when you are doing digital illustrations. You can, with this selected here, instead of having it under linear, let's go ahead and select the radial gradient. And you can see that now I have the dark here and the dark here and the light along the path here. So it looks more like a tube. So I'm going to hover up to the top corner here. You can see that I get sort of this back and forth triangle. If I do this and I just kind of look like it from this point of view, you can see that it does definitely look a little more dimensional. And what it's done is it is essentially duplicated. So I have it going across here like this, and then I have it going across here, but it's been sort of duplicated. And this can be super useful to make something look like it, especially if it's linear. So obviously we're looking at a linear gradient here. I'm going to double click on this here just so that I can make this a little not so stark here. And you can see that if I pick a gray and then I select off of it, so I'm actually just going to move it a little bit so we can see it a bit better. You can see that it's really made it look like a tube, and it's really dimensional. So that's another sort of cool sort of feature that you can do with this. Now, let's just go, I'm going to just go back a couple of steps just so that I can repeat what I just did. Okay, so I'm just doing Command Z to kind of get back, and I'm just going to try to get to this point here. And all I've done here is, as long as I have my stroke selected, and I just have black and white here, and it's just along the path, I can come in and select it across the stroke like this. And with it still selected, if I change it from linear to our radial, it will duplicate it so that it looks dimensional. Okay, so you have to do it in this sort of sequence in order to make this work. So it needs to be across the stroke, and then you click into the radial, and it will reflect it on the other side and duplicate it on the other side of the stroke.